The killing of Tshwane University of Technology student Ntokozo Xaba has raised a lot of questions about the safety of students at institutions of higher learning. Xaba's body was found with multiple stab wounds at her off-campus residence in Pretoria Gardens last week. Her ex-boyfriend, junior Blue Bulls player Ngcebo Thusi, stands accused as he was the last person to be seen with her. We'll speak to Commission for Gender Equality CEO Phelisa Nkomo. Thank you so much for your time. You want a meeting with the institution. What questions do you have for them?
I mean, firstly, even before we talk about what question we're going to ask them, we want to share with them the fact that the report we undertook with the institutions of higher learning, we picked up that most of them not only have systems that seeks to recruit women in decision-making roles within the institutions, but also that they have gender-based violence and femicide, policy, including any other, infrastructure that's required for them to fulfill that responsibility. So obviously, the first question we're going to be answering with them is whether Ntokozo had never reported any issue related to the boyfriend. I think the other one is just to look at and ask them and say, what are the type of gender-based violence, institutional supports, mechanisms that exist so that when women or students within the campus feel that they're likely to be under threat, that they can easily report, meaning that is a safe and security, in place? Is there any form of psychosocial support? Because remember, when abusers abuse women or even killers kill women, they don't just kill them on the first day. It's a protracted, abuse over a period of time. And normally women would internalize that or look for, safe spaces for them to actually ventilate or share their pain. Yeah. So in essence, there will be specific questions about Ntokozo, but at the same time, we'd really look at the institutional mechanisms around dealing with gender-based violence.
And it is that support that is quite critical to ensure that they find safe spaces to be able to come and talk about, different forms of abuse with, people that they would consider safe, people that they would consider supportive. Do you find that institutions take this to heart? Because this is not the first time we're seeing cases like these happen. At the same time, we've seen even students crying out at various institutions saying that these cries are being ignored.
I mean, that's true. In fact, the starting point, though, is that when institutions of higher learning don't even have gender equity policies, right? Because gender equity by design actually really demonstrate that the institution at a policy level or at a political level is committed into ensuring that it facilitates the participation of women in leadership within the academic institution, both in terms of the leadership, but also in terms of the teaching staff, and as well as administration. So that's the first issue. And then the second issue, then that there's always then a natural shift. Once you have that gender equity policy, then there becomes a natural shift into dealing what other issues that we need to deal with in relation to gender equity issues. Firstly, because through gender equity policy, you get to understand the patriarchal system and how it excludes women. And also it actually, as well as inflict, pain in a form of violence and abuse. So when institutions don't even have those basic frameworks, and you then actually begin to understand that the institutions have not really removed in as far as ensuring that it deals with gender-based violence. So our study that we have actually shows that even across. In fact, when we reach out to them, which is the Institutes of High Learning, the ones that we actually researched, they were saying no, they were prevented by, COVID pandemic for them to implement some of our proposals, but they remain committed. But the commitment in paper is not sufficient because then you need to see institutions that are executing and demonstrating, commitment. I mean, the basic issues that they need to trigger. Firstly, it's security. The second one is to make it sure that student support systems in a form of psychologists, psychosocial support, and as well as peer support to talk about what actually young women are going through in relationships. So those things don't really require even a council decision. It actually requires a dean. But the point I'm making is that if gender equity and transformation within the institution is not part of institutional culture, it's just going to take a long time for such decisions to be taken.
Phelisa, we've got about 20 seconds before we have to wrap up this conversation. What are you expecting then to hear from the president when he delivers the State of the Nation address on the issues around gender-based violence, particularly when you look at the fact that we're still talking about a gender-based violence council that is yet to even be instituted?
You know, creation of institutions is very important to fight gender-based violence. The fundamental issue, though, which is read very succinctly in the theory of change in the NSP, is that we need to commit in preventative measures. We need to have a public education and public conversation about gender-based violence. Gender-based violence is a political issue. It's not a women's issue. And we need to actually emphasize that women's rights are also human rights. So what the president is likely to do is going to send his condolences to the family, but also is also likely to articulate or emphasize the resolutions that were taken in the second gender summit, which was held in November last year, which among those called for men to have a conversation about toxic masculinity and a deep sense of entitlement over women's bodies, and where they believe that women have no rights to make their decision over their bodies.
All right, let's then see what happens there, and also catch up with you after your meeting with the institution to see what are some of the answers that you've managed, in fact, to get. That was the Commission for Gender Equality CEO, Phelisa Nkomo.